The lukewarm coffee in my paper cup was bitter, but I drank it anyway while the early morning operations call connected. It was barely 6 a.m. in Charlotte, North Carolina, and my office still smelled like damp carpet and the cleaning solution they used overnight. That did not matter. I had been awake since 4 a.m., diagnosing a network bottleneck that would have breached our service level agreement with our largest client by sunrise if I had not intervened. That was my normal routine. My name is Howard Vance. I am 58 years old, and for the past 5 years, I have been the quiet spine of Aegis Logistics. I manage the complex scheduling pipelines that kept our biggest enterprise contract moving. Back when the founder was still running the show, he used to call me the irreplaceable safeguard. He knew that if Howard did not verify the route, the cargo did not ship. That was back when technical excellence actually carried weight in this building. Now, the new leadership only cared about how polished your presentation slides looked during a 20-minute executive briefing. Aegis operated over 1,200 active distribution hubs across the East Coast, managing more than 500 shipping containers on any given business day. Our primary database processed over 50,000 real-time transaction logs every minute, capturing transit speeds, route temperatures, and driver schedules. I watched new corporate hires pitch optimization strategies as if they had invented the concept of transport, while I was the one resolving midnight escalations from shipping terminals. If I missed a single deadline, I was called a legacy bottleneck. If I saved them from a multi-million-dollar shipment failure, they forgot my name by the afternoon. But I never complained. That was not my style. I simply documented everything, kept my files organized, and did my job. Most of the junior directors presenting in our meetings did not even know how to access our server logs. They could not locate a database error on a map, but they knew exactly how to sell corporate enthusiasm. They polished their visual charts while I conversed with terminal operators at 2 a.m. in the rain. I managed to hold our primary logistics routing system together under budget, received zero public recognition, and was pushed further into the background. Then came Julian Cole. Julian was our new VP of Operations, fresh out of an expensive business program, with a tailored suit and an absolute lack of actual operations experience. He was the son of one of our board members, and he acted as if he had invented the logistics models that had been keeping this company profitable since he was in high school. In our first introduction, he looked at my desk, which was piled high with system printouts and regulatory guidelines, and asked if I could fetch some water for the presentation team. I did not blink. I simply unmuted my microphone and said I would be happy to fetch water once we finished discussing the upcoming route audit. He laughed, thinking I was joking. By the end of his first month, I had been removed from all operations meetings. My recurring calendar syncs with our main client, Crestmont Partners, vanished without explanation. My director claimed it was just Julian trying to streamline communication channels. Then the system changes began. Julian introduced a series of simplified dashboards that looked modern but buried the critical risk metrics we used to monitor shipment temperatures and customs clearances. I recognized the layout immediately. It was based directly on my proprietary algorithm, the Phoenix routing system. I had developed and patented that system under 35 U.S.C. Section 271 years before I ever joined Aegis Logistics. I had only granted Aegis a non-transferable, revocable license to use the code during my tenure as a compensated employee. The contract was very specific. If they attempted to modify the system or outsource its administration without my direct oversight, the license would automatically revoke under common law breach of licensing rules. I had made sure our general counsel at the time, Roger Kent, reviewed and signed that agreement. It was my insurance policy. One morning, Julian posted a message in the company-wide chat, claiming we were cleaning out the legacy clutter and moving toward automated outsourcing. It was a direct shot at my department. The junior staff clapped back with corporate emojis, but I remained silent. I simply copied the message, saved it to my private folder, and labeled it. A few days later, Julian stopped by my cubicle. He gave me a wide, superficial smile and told me he appreciated the groundwork I had done, but they were planning to evolve the platform. I smiled back and told him to read the system documentation very carefully before he started yanking wires. He laughed and walked away, completely unaware that he was stepping directly onto a legal landmine. By week 5, my access to the main Crestmont project database was revoked. I was locked out of the very dashboard I had built. I called Julian directly, the only time I ever did. I asked if he had cleared this access change with legal, reminding him that the Crestmont contract contained strict continuity provisions tied to my administrative oversight. Julian laughed and told me I was overthinking it, claiming they were growing past manual processes and had an offshore team ready to take over. I hung up, opened my copy of the Master Service Agreement, and highlighted Clause 8.4b. If I resigned, the client could walk immediately. I saved the document and waited for the upcoming all-hands call. The quarterly all-hands Zoom call arrived on a rainy Wednesday morning. I sat in my kitchen, my laptop screen casting a cold light across the dark wood table. More than 140 employees, board members, and executives had joined the call, their tiny video squares filling the grid. My slot was scheduled for the halfway mark, a brief 10 minutes to present our quarterly service level agreement compliance numbers. I had prepared the slide deck meticulously, ensuring that every operational parameter was represented accurately. The performance metrics were completely flawless, showing that Aegis Logistics had achieved a record-breaking 99.8% on-time delivery rate for the Crestmont account over the past 90 days. When my turn came, I shared my screen, showing a series of clean, steady graphs. I cleared my throat and began to explain the data. The first graph detailed our terminal throughput, showing a steady reduction in docking delays from 45 minutes to just 12 minutes under my new queuing models. The second graph tracked fuel efficiency, demonstrating a 15% reduction in fuel waste by optimizing our highway paths. That was when the interruption happened. Julian Cole cut in, his voice booming over the speaker, filled with a practiced corporate gloss. He thanked me dismissively, stating that Aegis was pivoting roles on this project. He announced to the entire company that as of this week, I would be transitioning out of direct involvement, and a dedicated offshore team was taking over to optimize our operational efficiency. Then, with a single click, Julian muted my microphone. In front of the entire staff, the board of directors, and the general counsel, he silenced me. My camera was still active, and everyone could see my face. I did not flinch, I did not attempt to unmute, and I did not type a single word in the chat. I simply sat there in silence, watching the slides change. The chat window was quiet for a brief moment, then junior analysts began posting congratulatory emojis for Julian's transition plan, completely unaware of the disaster that had just been initiated. I saw Roger Kent, our general counsel, lean forward in his Zoom window, his expression suddenly tight. He began writing something on a legal pad, his brow furrowed in deep concentration. He looked up from his notes, staring directly at my muted video square, then quickly looked away. Roger Kent had been Aegis's head of legal for 12 years. He was a conservative, meticulous lawyer who hated unexpected variables and always preferred to settle contract disputes before they ever reached a courtroom. He had spent weeks with me drafting our master agreements, and he knew that without my certified compliance keys, Aegis would be completely unable to prove to Crestmont's auditors that our shipments met federal standards. He knew what Julian was completely ignoring. By muting me and transitioning my duties to an uncertified offshore group, Julian had just triggered a massive operational default. The original contract with Crestmont Partners, which was worth $14 million in annual revenue, had a very specific clause that I had helped write during our negotiations. Clause 8.4b stated that if the named escalation lead, Howard Vance, resigned voluntarily, Crestmont Partners had the right to walk away from the contract immediately without penalty. But the legal exposure went far deeper than a simple client termination. The core software Aegis used to run the entire logistics network was my personal intellectual property. Under 17 U.S.C. Section 106, I held the exclusive rights to reproduce, distribute, and display the copyrighted source code of the routing algorithms. The software license I granted to Aegis was strictly contingent on my active employment and direct oversight. The contract explicitly stated that any attempt to transfer administration of the Phoenix routing system to an unauthorized third party, or to continue using it without my oversight, would immediately void the license. Under 35 U.S.C. Section 271, any continued operation of the software without a valid license would constitute willful patent infringement, exposing the company to treble damages. After the meeting ended, I quietly closed my laptop. The silence in my kitchen was peaceful. I had spent 5 years holding their chaotic operations together, sacrificing my weekends and late nights, only to be muted like legacy clutter. I opened my private files and drafted a concise resignation letter. I did not write a long essay detailing my grievances. I did not complain about Julian's arrogance. I simply wrote, "Please accept this email as formal notice that I am resigning from my position as Senior Director of Systems Architecture, effective immediately at 9:01 a.m. tomorrow morning." I addressed the email to the head of Human Resources, Julian, and the entire board of directors. Later that evening, I drove to the Aegis office. The building was dead quiet, save for the hum of the vending machines down the hall. I walked to my cubicle, packed my few personal belongings into a cardboard box, and wiped my desk clean. I did not delete files or damage any databases. I am a professional, and I knew that illegal sabotage would only give them legal leverage. I wanted my revenge to be completely clean and legally devastating. I placed my security badge inside a small white envelope, sealed it, and wrote a single line on the front, effective 9:01 a.m. I left the envelope in the center of my empty desk, walked out of the building, and drove home, ready for the morning. The next morning, the quarterly operational alignment meeting was scheduled for exactly 9 a.m. I joined the video call at 8:58 a.m. with my camera off and my microphone muted. Julian Cole was already hosting, his face filled with unearned confidence as he ran through his slide deck, talking about operational velocity and offshore synergy. I waited silently, watching the participant list climb to 140 people. At exactly 9:01 a.m., I turned my camera on. I had set my Zoom background to a plain black screen with bold white letters, effective 9:01 a.m. I held my resignation letter in one hand and my signed exit document in the other, placing them directly in front of the camera lens. The chat window on the side of the screen immediately exploded with questions. Executives began shifting in their seats. Julian stopped talking mid-sentence, his smile cracking as he noticed my video square. He stammered, telling me that we could discuss this offline, and that this was not the appropriate forum for personal matters. I did not say a word. I held the document steady for 10 seconds, ensuring every board member and the general counsel could read the timestamp and my signature. I saw Roger Kent, the general counsel, lean close to his screen, his face turning pale. He frantically pulled out his phone and began typing a message. I lowered the papers, clicked the menu, and ended the meeting for myself. I stood up, walked to my kitchen, and poured a fresh cup of coffee. Feeling a profound sense of relief, at 9:15 a.m., I sent a private email to Diane Thorne, the Director of Risk Management at Crestmont Partners. Diane was a sharp, no-nonsense executive who had worked closely with me for 5 years. We had built a deep professional trust. Diane Thorne was not just a typical corporate manager. She had started her career as a logistics compliance inspector in the federal government before moving to the private sector. She knew exactly how critical secure cryptographic handshakes were, and she had absolute zero patience for executive amateurs who did not understand risk management. I informed her that I had officially resigned from Aegis Logistics, effective as of 9:01 a.m. I attached a copy of my time-stamped resignation letter. The response from Crestmont was instantaneous. Within 2 hours, a formal legal notice was delivered to Aegis Logistics from Crestmont's legal department. The notice exercised Clause 8.4b of their Master Service Agreement, terminating the $14 million contract immediately without penalty due to the departure of the designated key personnel. The operational impact was immediate and catastrophic. The Phoenix routing system operated on a secure database bridge that required my personal biometric authorization token to transmit daily compliance logs to Crestmont's tracking systems. Since I was no longer an employee, I had logged out of the server and taken my personal hardware token with me. Without that secure bridge, Aegis's automated systems could no longer validate shipments. Within hours, the bank's automated risk management systems detected the compliance failure. By noon, the bank officially flagged Aegis Logistics with an emergency default status, freezing their entire rolling credit line of $50 million. The company's cash flow was cut off instantly, leaving them unable to process payments. Meanwhile, I was at home enjoying the quiet. I made a sandwich, read a book, and watched the sunlight crawl across my floor. My cell phone sat on the counter, vibrating continuously. Julian had called me 15 times before lunch. I did not answer. At 2:00 p.m., I drove to the headquarters of Vanguard Solutions, Aegis's primary competitor. The managing partner had been trying to recruit me for years, and I was finally ready to talk. I walked into their glass-walled conference room where their executive team was waiting. I told them I was a free agent, and I was bringing my proprietary logistics models and a $14 million client relationship with me. We signed a contract before the afternoon was over. The terms of my contract at Vanguard were incredibly generous. I was given the title of Senior Managing Partner, with complete autonomy over the systems integration division. I would be allowed to select my own team, build our logistics software using my patented systems, and oversee all enterprise accounts. The contract also included a comprehensive legal indemnity clause, protecting me from any baseless litigation Aegis might attempt to file. Silas Montgomery, the managing partner at Vanguard, shook my hand warmly, expressing his excitement to finally have me on board. As I walked out of the Vanguard building, I checked my phone. I had 25 new missed calls and a dozen text messages from various Aegis managers, each one more panicked than the last. I smiled and drove home to enjoy my evening. Julian had hired a budget operations center in Mumbai, telling the board that their lower hourly rates would save Aegis over $250, zeroed a month in labor costs. He had ignored my warning that their team had zero certification in managing U.S. interstate transit compliance or dynamic routing logs. They had never even logged into a terminal console, yet they were expected to keep our entire logistics network online. The hardware token itself was a specialized security key, configured with my specific administrative certificates. It was registered under my name with the Federal Customs Department, and its signature was required every 24 hours to clear the port containers. Since I was now a civilian, leaving that key connected would be a clear violation of government security protocols. By Friday morning, the panic inside Aegis Logistics had reached a fever pitch. The company-wide Slack channels were filled with frantic messages from junior managers, trying to understand why their dashboards were throwing database connection errors. Every client report and operations monitor displayed a flashing crimson warning: license terminated, contact system architect. Because Julian had proceeded with outsourcing my role, the revocable software license for the Phoenix routing system was officially void under 17 U.S.C. Section 106. The offshore team had attempted to bypass the login portal, but the system's security protocols immediately locked down, detecting unauthorized administrative access. Under 35 U.S.C. Section 271, Aegis was now facing massive statutory liability for patent infringement. The real-world consequences of Julian's incompetence began to play out in shipping ports across the country. Because the routing engine was locked, Aegis could not generate the customs clearance codes or route logs required for cargo transit. In major shipping terminals from Newark to Los Angeles, dozens of transport trucks carrying millions of dollars in inventory were halted at the gates. Port authorities refused to let the trucks clear without the validated compliance manifests. The entire logistics network came to a grinding standstill. I received a frantic text message from one of our old team members, explaining that Julian was locked in his office, yelling at the IT staff, while his father, board member Gordon Cole, was demanding a full review of the software contracts. My phone continued to ring. I had received 54 missed calls from Julian and Gordon in a single day. I finally received a long voicemail from the CEO, Gordon Cole. His voice was stripped of its usual authority, replaced by a desperate, shaky tone. He pleaded with me to call him back, promising that we could resolve the compensation issues and that Julian's behavior was a massive misunderstanding. He claimed that the board was prepared to offer me a significant promotion if I would return to the office and unfreeze the compliance systems. Instead, I forwarded the voicemail to my attorney, who was already preparing a formal cease and desist letter regarding the unauthorized use of my intellectual property. I spent the afternoon at a local park, enjoying a quiet walk in the autumn air. For 5 years, I had lived in a constant state of operational emergency, responding to server failures at 3 a.m. and managing chaotic logistics schedules under intense pressure. Now the silence was absolute. I had given my life to Aegis, and they had treated me as a disposable asset. Watching their entire logistics network fracture under the weight of their own arrogance was the cleanest resolution I could have imagined. I received a text from Diane Thorne at Crestmont, which read simply, "Power move, let's talk soon." I smiled, put my phone in my pocket, and continued my walk. By Friday evening, Aegis's largest investors were demanding answers on an emergency conference call. The board could not explain why their primary logistics engine was non-operational, or why their $50 million credit line remained frozen by the bank. When an investor asked who was currently managing the Crestmont account, Julian was forced to admit that I had resigned and that they were locked out of the database. The silence on the call was deafening. The investors realized that the entire company was built on a foundation they did not own, and the architect had just walked out the door with the keys. The M&A merger Aegis had been negotiating for months was declared dead by the buyers within the hour. The collapse of the merger was the final nail in their coffin. Aegis had been counting on the acquisition capital to restructure their mounting debt. Without that funding, and with their primary credit line frozen, they had no way to pay their terminal fees or outstanding logistics invoices. By Saturday morning, shipping terminals began seizing Aegis containers to cover unpaid docking fees. The company's customer service lines were flooded with calls from furious distributors whose cargo was sitting in warehouses. Julian had completely vanished from internal communications, leaving the junior staff to deal with the fallout. I sat on my deck, sipping tea, watching the logistics index show Aegis's operational activity drop to zero. By Friday afternoon, the backlog of Aegis containers had created a massive traffic jam outside the port of Newark. Over 80 trucks were backed up onto the highway, their engines idling as dispatchers argued with terminal officers who refused to let them clear. Several shipping containers held temperature-sensitive pharmaceuticals and organic agricultural products, which were now at risk of complete spoilage. The port authorities threatened to fine Aegis $10,000 for every hour our blocked trucks remained on terminal grounds. The terminal master at the port of Newark was a veteran named Hank who had known me for 15 years. He called me directly on Friday afternoon, laughing about the complete chaos Julian's team was causing. He told me that he would not let a single Aegis truck through the gate until they had a validated customs routing manifest signed by a certified security officer, which they could not produce. Oakbridge Holdings had been conducting due diligence for their proposed acquisition of Aegis Logistics. Their analysts had spent weeks reviewing Aegis's revenue projections, which were heavily dependent on the Crestmont contract. The moment Oakbridge's risk team saw that Crestmont had officially canceled their agreement, they withdrew their purchase offer immediately. On Monday morning, I received an email from Gordon Cole, begging me to join an emergency Zoom conference. When I logged into the meeting, the Aegis board of directors looked completely defeated. Gordon sat in the center, his eyes bloodshot and his suit unpressed. Julian was nowhere to be seen, having been stripped of all authority by the board. Gordon practically pleaded with me on camera. He offered me the official title of Chief Financial Officer, an annual base salary of $750,000, and a 20% equity stake in Aegis Logistics if I would sign the system release forms and return to manage the Crestmont transition. I looked at the screen, holding my teacup, completely calm. I told Gordon that his offer was 5 years too late. I informed the board that I had signed an exclusive agreement with Vanguard Solutions as their new senior managing partner. Furthermore, because of their daughters' and sons' incompetence, Crestmont Partners had officially moved their entire logistics portfolio to Vanguard. The $14 million contract was gone for good. but the final blow was already landing. With their credit line frozen and 70% of their revenue gone, Aegis was forced to shut down operations. Because they laid off their entire workforce overnight without the mandatory 60-day notice, they were in direct violation of the Warren Act, 29 U.S.C. Section 2101. The employees had already filed a class action lawsuit, leaving the board and executives personally liable for millions in back wages. Within 3 months, Aegis Logistics filed for Chapter 7 bankruptcy. The board was forced to sell the remaining assets of the company to Vanguard Solutions for pennies on the dollar to settle their debts. Julian Cole faced civil lawsuits for gross negligence and breach of fiduciary duty. His corporate career was permanently ruined, and he became a laughingstock in the logistics industry. As for me, my transition to Vanguard was highly successful. I migrated the Crestmont contract smoothly on my first day. I also hired my entire former junior operations team from Aegis, giving them 50% salary increases and the professional respect they were always denied under Julian's toxic management. Now, I stand at my penthouse office window, looking out over the city. A year has passed since I walked out of that boardroom. The air in my office is quiet, and the Phoenix routing system is running flawlessly on Vanguard servers under my direct supervision. I often reflect on the lesson of my resignation. True professional power does not come from a title granted by an ungrateful manager. It comes from the intrinsic value you carry in your mind, your technical expertise, and your refusal to let a toxic corporate system treat you as disposable. I did not have to actively destroy Aegis Logistics. My quiet, calculated departure did that for me. I was never just a cog in their machine. I was the engine all along, under the worker adjustment and retraining notification. Act 29 U.S.C. Section 2101. Aegis was legally required to provide our 320 terminal employees and analysts with a formal 60-day notice of a mass layoff or office closure. Because the company's rolling credit line was completely frozen by the bank, they had no cash to cover payroll or severance for that 60-day period. By simply locking the gates and terminating everyone on Monday afternoon, the executives made themselves and the company's directors personally liable for full back wages and benefit penalties, a legal disaster that quickly pierced their corporate liability shields. The class action lawsuit filed by the terminated Aegis employees was handled by a prominent labor law firm in North Carolina. They moved quickly to secure a pre-judgment attachment of the company's remaining physical assets, ensuring that Julian and Gordon could not hide the remaining corporate funds in offshore shell accounts. The court quickly ruled that Aegis's sudden closure was a willful violation, awarding the employees the maximum statutory damages under federal law. Vanguard's operations room was a modern state-of-the-art facility located in the heart of Charlotte's financial district. On Tuesday morning, my new team members arrived, looking incredibly relieved to have escaped the sinking ship at Aegis. They sat down at their new desks, configured their profiles, and within 2 hours, we had successfully routed our first batch of Crestmont containers using Vanguard's updated systems. The transition was so seamless that the Crestmont distributors barely noticed a shift in service. The morning sun reflects off the glass buildings of Charlotte, and for the first time in my career, I feel a sense of true professional fulfillment. My team at Vanguard is thriving, working in an environment built on mutual respect and technical competence rather than corporate posturing. My phone no longer rings with frantic emergencies at 3 a.m. Instead, I receive structured operational reports and appreciation notes from clients who value our stability. I take a slow sip of my tea, turn back to my desk, and begin configuring our new international routing tables. The past is behind me, and the future we are building is entirely on our own terms. The machine is running perfectly, and I am the one holding the coordinates. I sit back, looking at the city below, and feel a deep sense of gratitude for the choices I made. The road here was long and filled with sacrifices, but the destination was worth every single struggle. True peace is not the absence of work. It is doing work that matters with people who respect you,